I have been really curious of folks that are using Cursor beyond just app development. So things like project management, things like writing strategy for product requirements doc. Like, talk to me a little bit about some of the use cases of Cursor that might turn heads of like, we've assumed Cursor's for this, but folks are kind of pushing it beyond what maybe it was even thought to be used for in the beginning.
Yeah, well, speaking of linear, they have a great example of awesome use of Cursor. So they have a zero bug policy. If you've seen that,
Oh,
where
that's a very bold statement.
it is a bold statement, and their job is to, when a customer reports a bug, they are going to fix it right away.
Wow.
And they turn it around incredibly fast. So you have to ask, how did they do that?
Yeah, for
How,
sure.
how do they pull that
Yeah.
off? And one of the things they do is when an issue comes in, it gets obviously put into their linear issue list. And who does the first triage on it? Well, they can actually send it over to agents. And so they're able to have on an issue, just tag in Cursor and say, hey, can you fix this?
Wow.
Can you take a shot at this? And of course, it doesn't get it right every single time, but it saves people a lot of work in trying to diagnose.
Root cause analysis
Yeah.
takes so much time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if I'm an engineer on call, I'm trying to triage an issue. I would much rather open up an issue that has shots on goal. Like, they've tried things. I have some logs. I have some ideas. It's much better than starting from scratch and trying to make sense of potentially a fire hose of data. So I love that example of linear using Cursor really in the background. So it's agents just running through an API essentially. And I think there's a lot of other use cases like that that maybe are not as obvious as opening up an editor and kind of coding in the foreground when you have an API and you have these SDKs where you can build custom workflows on top.
Gosh, you're making me think. Like last week, I had an issue where we just launched Vega OS, which is essentially OS based on Linux, but you can build React Native apps directly on device. You don't have to go through Android. And I was trying to help the Eng team debug something. The device simulator sits on my Mac, and I had to essentially load the simulator and then run through ADB like journal CTL to monitor it in order to get the logs. It was like really hard. There was a couple things that like had to happen at the same time, but I couldn't like get them all to work. And you're making me think like that probably I could just write that as a requirement. And I'm assuming these different agents could like work in tandem for me to basically get what the team needs is show me the logs of the simulator device running, and then also take that first pass of trying to figure out what is causing the app to crash.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing for having multiple agents take a stab at it is generally what we've seen the progression with AI coding. So we already talked a little bit about tab autocomplete coding, right?
Yeah.
That was like the first wave. Yeah, I think a lot of people got really excited about coding with AI. Then the second wave was, okay, we can use agents. They can do some work for us. They still need some hand holding, but this is definitely an improvement. That was kind of the second wave. And the third wave right now that a lot of people are experimenting with is, okay, we trust the agents now.
Yep.
We have developed strategies for working with them.
Yep.
We have figured out that if we give them really high quality context, we're going to get better code output.
Of
Right?
course.
So now, how do we go from one to maybe two or three agents running in parallel? You can just get more work out of them. Well, to do that, there's actually a lot of new challenges that introduce. I mean, we've seen a lot of people exploring CLI-based coding agents, Cursor as well.
Yeah.
And part of the idea here is they are a little bit easier to run in parallel because you have these different worlds, different environments. Each one's just like a new terminal tab. But if you think about, there's kind of two separate problems. If it's on your local machine, you have multiple agents trying to update the same files
At the same time.
And
So line numbers are changing in real time. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so like there's a isolation problem there.
Yes.
And if it's in the cloud, you can boot up a virtual machine and make a snapshot of the kind of repo at that time.
Yeah.
So you don't have that problem, but you have the infrastructure problem, right?
What can happen sequentially versus what has to happen linearly?
There's been a lot of exploration here of trying to figure out what this looks like. And something we've been working on at Cursor is what the next version of an IDE looks like, where you're managing coding agents. And most people who are professional software engineers open up an editor, they look at a file tree and they write code, right?
Yeah.
But in a couple years, it's very likely that might be you open up your editor and you're looking at agent runs. And to do that, you need a GUI for working with agents, and nobody's really figured this out yet. So we have a version that's coming out this month that I'm pretty excited about.
It's interesting, there's been a lot of instances of folks forking VS Code, adding some UI, AI magic to it. And I've heard it said like, if you imagine between the horse and buggy carriage and between the first Ford automobile, they would call it a horseless buggy. And this idea of like even self-driving cars that still have the steering column and the driver's seat, like there are going to be tools that y'all and many other companies develop that we can't even envision. Like, what does it look like in the future? And so I would imagine, yeah, you're talking a lot about like, we can't just say it's CLI and GUIs are done. Like the tools we need for the futures don't even exist yet.
Yeah.
I imagine y'all are thinking a lot about modality between the IDEs I already use and online services to have that really solid DX.
Andre Karpathy gave a really interesting talk where he talked about the autonomy slider of these AI coding tools. And he talked about how when the autonomy slider is low, it's like you're doing most of the coding and then you get the tab autocomplete.
Yes.
And then you can dial it up a little bit where maybe you want an inline suggestion. Just let me run AI just for that one line. And then you dial it up a little bit further. And now we're coding with an AI, right? We're coding with an agent who's letting, do a bunch of things for us more autonomously. And then on the far right, it's like, I'm managing multiple coding agents that are doing things for me.
Yeah.
And we're slowly over time, people are starting to get more comfortable as we move things over to the right.
It's building trust.
It's exactly what you said, where it's like, you see that same progression in self-driving cars where
Of course.
it's like, we're still,
Vehicles aren't actually designed for the future state.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's what Cursor's trying to do right now is really bridge the gap.
Okay.
A lot of people expect, a lot of programmers expect to open up an editor and see a file tree on the left or the right, depending on your preference. And that's some hot takes there. I'm more of a left guy now. I went to the right for a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, look at your code, obviously manage your files on your file system. And I think this idea of looking at agent runs is kind of foreign to most people. And I don't know if they see value in it yet. So there is this path of people need to try it out, try these tools, mess with it. And they're slowly building trust in, okay, like this is actually beneficial for me.
That makes sense. All right. So when I've used Cursor and I've also had maybe ChatGPT Mac app open, I've noticed y'all have a lot of good integrations with OpenAI. I'm curious. I think there's sometimes assumptions that Cursor is just for OpenAI or just for one provider. Like if you're hosting on AWS or you're hosting on another service or you're using different agents, like what does Cursor play nice with? Can it, a lot of folks will go like, would it actually work in my stack? So kind of curious, like where and when and how can you use Cursor? Because a lot of folks only know that as the IDE with a specific LLM in mind.
Yeah, so one thing that we care a lot about is making sure that Cursor works with multiple models from multiple providers. And because this space moves so fast, the model that you pick for each task changes like every 6 months.
Oh, true.
New versions come out. The model labs are just getting better and better about making these amazing frontier models. And typically from what we see for coding, there isn't one clear winner. There isn't one model that is just a million times better than the others. So for example, we often see people picking different models for different tasks at Cursor. So for example, we talked about planning earlier. GPT-5 from OpenAI is very good at planning.
Reasoning.
Yeah. And we see a lot of people do that. And then we also see a lot of people use models from Anthropic, like Sonnet. Yeah. And they use that for more of the coding once the plan has been generated. And what we're starting to see is this shift from you want to have both of these things. You want to have a very intelligent model, the smartest model that any lab can provide to solve the gnarliest bugs, right? You're always going to want that, and you're going to be willing to pay for that intelligence. And then you want something that's really fast. It still needs to be smart, but it's not trying to be GPT-10. It's not trying to be AGI. It needs to be fast, and it can write most of the code for you. And I think there's a lot of innovation happening there for your daily pair programmer that's really fast, where you don't have to like just stare at text on a screen while like generating,
Just bought a Mac Mini M4 so that I could run WAN 2.4, some image generation, and then also some Llama models like on device.
Yeah.
And so Cursor, obviously you're calling out to the cloud often. Can Cursor also work with on device LLMs or agents or anything like that?
Yeah, not currently, but it is something that I've thought about.
Okay.
Right. Today, usually when you're working with a model in Cursor, you're going and talking to some cloud version. So there are still some open weight models that are hosted in cloud providers that you can still use in Cursor. Generally what we see is, seems like there's kind of a shift towards whatever the latest, most intelligent model is. People are going to use that the most.
The shelf life of these models is pretty short.
Yep. But then outside of that, then it's quite a bit more competitive in the like, what am I going to do for using just a ton of tokens on the daily coding? And that's where I get to this conversation around like, you want something that's pretty fast, and the latency really matters, which makes sense. Like, as programmers, we're so used to, minimizing latency on every single keystroke. We're not going to wait 4 minutes on every single task we're trying to do. It makes sense for the most complicated tasks in the background, but you also need, there's these different modalities of like, the foreground work is very different than the background work.
How do you show someone how to get started in running versus like the 200, 300 level concepts
Oh yeah.
without them feeling really overwhelmed or imposter syndrome? So like, how do you think about teaching this stuff?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier a little bit about bringing in the PMs and the designers too. And as I am a few months into this new role at Cursor, I started talking to a lot of developers and non-developers, and there was a consistent theme. I would start talking to them about coding with AI, and I realized that there were all these words I was using that I was assuming that, oh, everybody knows those, right?
Or like lingo?
Yeah, it's like, no, no, no. Oh no, I have all of this lingo that people don't understand yet. So I started to really reel it back. Okay, what are all the shared foundations that you need to know to just understand what's happening with coding
Totally.
with AI? And you can't understand models unless you understand what tokens are. And you can't understand coding with AI unless you understand that those tokens make up the context and the
Totally.
context window. And you need to know that models can get things wrong. And what does it look like when they get things wrong? And what do you
Yeah.
do based on that? How do you set up your app so that if you code with AI, you can more predictably get good results? And I noticed this theme. I was like, okay, this is the 101.
Yeah.
You can go into specific prompting tricks or all sorts of things and later
Having
later
shared
lessons.
an understanding of the terms you're saying.
Yeah. Shared understanding of the terms and like solid foundations. So for the last 2 months, that's what I built for cursor.com/learn. We have an AI foundations course. You can take it in an hour, and it's for everybody. It's not just engineers. You can take it if you're a product manager or designer, but it doesn't shy away from, the goal is to be more like an engineer. You want to write code. You want to read the code. It's not that you're building stuff and you're going to throw it away. We want to help more people be productive with
Yeah.
building software.
Yeah. How can you help folks watching this make sense of where you're thinking things are going, making that transition and what that means?
Yes. When models weren't as good as they are now, so maybe a year ago
Yep.
or a couple years ago, it really mattered how you structured the prompts that you gave them. And you could do all these little tricks and tips to really get the best quality out of the models. And as coding agents have got better and better, the models have got better and better,
Mhm.
and the models have got better at calling tools, all of a sudden you don't really have to use as many of those tricks up front. The
Right.
models are more generally intelligent, and it actually can be harmful to do some of those tricks because you're giving all of this bloat into the prompt when really you can just let the agent take its best pass on what it's trying to do. So I've tried to stay away from telling people, you need to do this specific prompt template in this format, because as the models are getting better, a lot of those things are less and less important. So then the question is, what does become important? If it's not the prompt hacks or tricks, how do you get really good quality out of the models? And that's where context engineering comes in. So as an engineer, what are we great at? Trying to design systems that help us get predictably good outcomes. And with context engineering, it's how do I give the agent really good input context?
Right.
So if you think about what you do as an engineer, as your job, you are having lots of input context that you're looking at.
Totally.
You have LSPs, language server protocols. You have ESLint, or you have some kind of linting system. You have a typed language that has typed errors like a TypeScript.
Right.
All of these things in your editor are giving you really good signals for what's wrong. So with context engineering, you're finding ways to pipe all of that back into the agent so the agent can fix itself. It's a self-correcting loop. So when the agent generates some code, all of a sudden it lights up and it says, this didn't compile. This did not pass linting. It also didn't meet the rules that we've defined for our app. Fix it. And it just fixes itself. We have a 6-part video series that teaches you all the AI foundations. On the right side of the page, there's a cursor-like agent window that you can chat with.
Oh, cool.
So you can go back and forth and ask questions if you want to learn more. And you can also download Cursor and try it out for free if you want. That's a great place to get started.
For more advanced devs that just want to like pull down a sample, are there any Anything on GitHub? Is there any projects or reference apps that would be good for them to check out to get a sense?
So if you are more of an advanced engineer
Yeah.
and you're wanting to get into coding with AI, what my
They
recommendation
don't read the manual.
they don't read the manual. I would download Cursor
Yep.
and I would use it on your, your code base of choice where
Yep.
you work for your job or your personal project and try to build a new feature. Start with
To an existing app?
yeah, to an existing app.
Okay.
Start by asking questions. So open up the agent, say, how is this feature in the app implemented? Where is this code at in the app? And it's even better if you don't have a ton of previous knowledge of the
Right.
app.
Right.
And just ask questions and start to learn how the models work. And then say, okay, maybe let's try to build something. So let's go into plan. Let's try to build a new feature. You're going to go back and forth with the agent on a plan. It's going to spit out what the plan is. And then you are still the human in the loop. Review the plan, read through it. Does that look right? Critique the outputs and then have it generate the code.
That's so.
And then you can look at the code and start to see, okay, based on the code, does this work? Does it compile? Is it good? You can actually do the testing.
That's the way to go because someone already is comfortable with the code base. And half the time when I get assigned something, the work is actually figuring out what's the problem statement and where, like making what's that saying? Like the magic is on the AI, but it's a problem written down is a problem half solved. And that is so much better than just staring at a blinking cursor, not knowing where to get started.
Yeah.
Okay, Leah, really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time. Really respect the work you've done. It inspires me to try stuff out and stay fresh. But yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, y'all.